Welcome to Differentiated Instruction by Lee Demers, Malena Gonzalez, and Brent Sharp. My name is Lee Demers. First off, in this presentation, we're going to start with the introductions, so you get to know who each one of us are as instructors. Second, we're going to talk about differentiated instruction. We're also going to talk about the things to consider when implementing differentiated instruction. What are the advantages and disadvantages? When is it best used? And why should we use it? Then we'll delve into some of our personal experiences of how we use the practice of differentiated instruction within our classroom, as well as the conclusion, and last but not least, the references. I hope you enjoy the presentation.
What is differentiated instruction? Differentiation means tailoring instruction to meet specific needs. We have classrooms which are filled with different types of students. These students have different perspectives in life and learning, as their personal experience, abilities, interests, motivators influence on how ready they are in our classroom. As an instructor, we need to understand what type of learners we have and what learning needs they may have. The instructor becomes very important in this methodology as we need to try to understand the students, where they're coming from, get to know them a little bit to understand how we can adapt our current curriculum to let the students succeed in their own learning. Differentiated instruction gives accountability to the student of the content they're learning, and the instructor facilitates the process. It helps that the instructor is an expert in the field, as the instructor's role is to facilitate an environment that is open for this type of learning or to build a community with the students. In this type of classroom, students learn how to think for themselves, and it helps develop critical and analytical skills.
Things we need to consider implementing differential instruction. Some of the things we need to consider with this topic is definitely the class size, because the bigger the class size, obviously the more awkward it could possibly be because of the size of the class. Also considering each student's learning style, because you have to be able to identify the different learning styles within the class, either before the class begins or through it, and be able to recognize different styles in the different students. Also, one of the other things you have to consider is student foundations. What foundations do they come from? What is their background? How much knowledge do they have within the basic foundations of the industry that you're trying to teach or instruct? Consider preparation time for the instruction. How long does it take to prepare for the differentiated instruction? We have to really understand how long it's going to take, how much time involved. A lot of prep is required. You also have to be able to give up control of the classroom and be a little flexible with the students, because it takes a lot of extra time involved, and you've got to be able to be willing to let the students give you some direction, because it's almost student directed in some ways. Some of the recap and report meetings between student and instructor plays a big role also, because that builds a bit of a foundation on what direction you're going to go with the differentiated instruction. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantages. The advantages of differentiated instruction is taught to their learning style. So in other words, the advantage is you're able to teach to the learning style and understanding each student's needs, because you're going to have many different learning styles within each individual. within the individual planning. You can monitor and you can create different plans for the students that are maybe struggling a little more, and you can be very creative within that as far as their learning styles go, and plan your topics and your discussions around that problem. Teacher creativity. You're able to be more creative within your classroom and do different types of tasks in your standard inside the box thinking or other types of lecture. So you can branch away from that, and it builds more creativity within the classroom and builds more confidence. One of the biggest things that I find with advantages is students aren't left behind because you're teaching to the different learning styles. So everybody is brought up to speed and they're learning at their pace equally within the classroom. That way they're not left behind wondering what went on as far as what was being taught. Also, flexibility. There's a lot of flexibility within this teaching within the classroom because you can adapt and you can change on the fly. The flexibility really helps to understand this. The disadvantages to this, though, is bigger load within the instructor. It takes a lot longer to prepare for this. You have to spend a lot more time thinking about your students as you prepare for your lesson plans. Sometimes through the program that you're teaching, you've got very tight time constraints within the classroom. Also, with student learning, they're learning at different paces. So one may be a very quick learner and fast learner, and then you've got the ones that are very slow. So trying to bring those up to the same level can be very difficult. And that, of course, is when you're doing your learning lesson plans, scheduling is very hard because you've got to think of all these things prior to going into your program, because you may not have seen your students yet, you may not have identified any kind of issues up until this point.
Differentiated instruction, and when is it best used? Differentiated instruction is best used when time constraints are not an issue, which means essentially we're looking at smaller classroom sizes. And the reason that is because you need to design the curriculum to meet the needs of each individual student. So therefore, it requires a lot of front-end work from the instructor in that case to make sure that they have everything prepared for each individual. And another thing here, which I find could be used essentially in any type of teaching method, would be to create a positive learning environment. You just want to make sure that you create an environment where students feel comfortable, not afraid to ask questions, and that try to make the learning in an enjoyable way. I mean, this can be done in a number of ways. Even, for example, I like to use Jeopardies when we're doing review of some of the content, or even crosswords when it comes to definitions. Just little things like that where you can kind of help turn it into a positive environment and essentially try to make it a little bit learning more fun. And another thing here too is also creating a supportive learning environment. In this case, where you can allow the stronger students to actually help out the weaker students and let them work together and create a teamwork where they actually help each other out. In that case, the stronger students, by helping the others, actually helps reinforce the information, solidifies their knowledge, as well as helps out the weaker students. And sometimes in that case, just hearing it presented in a different manner, hearing it from a different voice, can also sometimes help the other students catch on. And I mean, teamwork, there's nothing wrong with that. We use that pretty much in any field. And last but not least is that as an instructor, you also have to be willing to let go a little bit, where essentially you need to kind of let go of the control aspect of the classroom. You become there to kind of more be of a kind of a guide to help direct the students into the right direction and ensure that they reach their learning goals.
Why should we do this? our institutions, whether it be high school, colleges, universities, we've taught traditionally in a very structured environment. With today's industry and today's changing world, creating a non-structured approach in a structured environment seems to be a very positive way of looking at it. Most of the time, our students now will grasp a non-structured approach a lot faster than a structured environment. It brings creativity within the student. It brings the appreciation of wanting to learn, because we want to have an environment that will bring those things out. With today's students, we're seeing cultural differences within the learning styles. We have such a vast cross-cultural classroom now, with immigrants and different people from different areas within the country. In our classrooms, we have to start learning to adapt from culturally through their different learning styles, because each one of them was given a different learning style based on culture sometimes. We are approaching it from foundations they already have and built on. So in other words, they're coming from industry already, or they have transferable skills that they may not know. And we're working from those foundations, because it's like learn from what you already know and expand on it. These concepts have been around a long time, but never maybe in the learning industry per se, or it's just not very many people really think of this as a good approach to it. Bringing back creativity in our students for today's challenging world. Well, that should be one of our biggest reasons why, is because of today's changing world, we need to bring back the creativity, the thinking skills, all these skills that are within our students that the younger generation lack. Bringing fairness so all can learn the best way they know how. Well, bringing fairness to the classroom is so important, because how can we allow the weak ones to fall away and not try to create an environment that they will learn the best way they know how? They may not be as bright as the strongest student in the classroom, but they will get there if you're willing to put the time into it. And bringing fairness is such a strong concept.
Lee's personal practice of differentiated instruction. First and foremost, you need to create an inclusive classroom and promote teamwork. And what I mean by that is, as an instructor, I strongly believe we are there to provide the students with the tools required to successfully complete the course. And on the student's end, they're there to use those tools to achieve their end goal, which is also to successfully complete the course. So on that front, as an instructor, you need to adapt the curriculum to meet each one of the students' needs. And at the very beginning, it's a little hard to know as to how each student learns individually. And I feel that you can overcome that by continually doing ongoing assessments, and which means that you can actually see and track the progress of each individual student. You see where they are, their strengths, their weaknesses, and also to see what works and doesn't work when it comes to their instruction. Another good part here, which ties in with the teamwork aspect, is pairing the stronger students with the weaker ones. And what this does is it helps the stronger students, A, reinforce their knowledge, and B, helps the weaker students sometimes just hear it from a different light, get the material presented in a different way, which therefore can help them really retain that information. Another thing that I like to use in my class is providing students with a choice for their learning. When it comes to assignments and even methods of presentation of the material, I like to have a couple of different ways prepared in advance and provide them with the option. This way, they have the onus. The onus is on them, where they are choosing. They have a say in how they receive their education. And last but not least is enabling the classroom discussions. Whether a lot of times just by using personal experiences and letting the students talk about them or ask questions to the instructor about the instructor's past experiences really helps to tie that information and helps the student relates with their past experiences, and helps all that information tie together.
In my own personal practice, due to the nature of the topic I currently teach, it facilitates the implementation of differentiated instruction. Part of the problem-based learning methodology is to understand the different types of students we have in the classroom and try to facilitate where each student can succeed on their own area. Every year, I provided students with a test to understand their learning style and also help me adapt my current curriculum to add activities or lessons for different learning styles. Main example is our capstone project, which I mentor and facilitate. In this project, our students work with a real client, understand their needs, but they are also able to pick who they will be working with and what type of job they want to have. This is the opportunity for them to select an area of study. These type of projects are fun and very engaging for the students and for myself, as I also learn from these clients, and the most important part is providing the feedback right away. I see it as the way industry mentors you and helps you grow your own personal skills. I find these type of projects have an organic flow. If you provide the students with the different opportunities and they get engaged with the topic, the learning will happen both ways.
My personal practices in this instruction. Learning to read the student's needs is got to be one of the hardest things to do as an instructor, but understanding their needs and learning to read them sometimes in class, because you really have to watch to see, because sometimes the students won't say that they're having struggles with how you're teaching them on the different approaches you're looking at. And that's being that the case, learning how to change your learning approaches on the fly is very important, because you may actually get a student that says, I don't get it, could you explain it in a different way? So you've got to change the approach of how you do it, and you've got to be able to adapt to the student's needs, sometimes on a case-by-case basis right in the classroom while you're lecturing, or you're doing a demonstration, or you're trying to build a positive attitude within the classroom. Also, having alternative learning packages that are set in place for those students that are not quite getting the understanding of what you're trying to teach that day or that class, that you can give them either as homework or they can do on their own time, or even sometimes working with them even after the class is over. Some approach sometimes helps me with mixing the strong student with the weak student. That way the strong student is usually further ahead than the weaker student, so the stronger student can kind of guide and direct the weaker student without actually doing the work for them. One thing I think is important is building real life into the training. You know, if we can have something tangible that they can see or they've experienced that really ties into the topic that we're working with. It's like painting a picture, because like pictures paint 1,000 words as the story goes. So building a real life scenario within the training, I think, is also vital, especially with most students, because really that's how we learn, is what we see and what we do. We retain 90% of hands-on versus what we hear or what we read. Also, being open to allow new ideas within the students. They will come to you and ask you different ideas, and as long as they pertain to the topic and it's relevant to what we're teaching and how we're teaching, I think it's very important that the student can bring something to the table, because they may be able to approach it in a different way that you as an instructor can. So, you know, we talk about lifelong learning. Well, this is a prime example of, as an instructor, how we lifelong learn, even from our own students. Part of having a class is we learn from each other. Thank you.
Differentiated instruction is not the solution that will help you overcome the diversity in the classroom, but it is one of the better tools we have to build a better learning environment for the students that are in our classroom today. Try to be open to suggestions and changes, and provide all the students with the opportunity to approach the topic this way. Thank you from Lee, Malena, and Brent. The reference will follow.